Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum. Om Guru Vajradhar Sumatimu Nisha Sane Karma Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Om Guru Vajradhar Sumatimu Nisha Sane Karma Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Om Guru Vajradhar Sumatimu Nisha Sane Karma Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Om Guru Vajradhar Sumatimu Nisha Sane Karma Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Om Guru Vajradhar Sumatimu Nisha Sane Karma Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Sarva Siddhi Om Guru Vajradhara Om Guru Vajradhara Sumatimu Nisha Sane Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Pakyuke Kudan Dagi Lu Pakyuke Sundan Dagi Nga Pakyuke Tugdan Dagi Ten Yerme Chintu Jingil Makyuke Kudan Dagi Lu Makyuke Sundan Dagi Nga Makyuke Tugdan Dagi Ten Yerme Chintu Jingil Sangye Chedan Tsogi Chonam La Chanchu Pardo Dani Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonamgi Drola Pinchira Sangye Druparashu Sangye Chedan Tsogi Chanchu Pardo Dani Kepsuchi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonamgi Drola Pinchira Sangye Druparashu Sangye Chedan Tsogi Chonamla Chanchu Pardo Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi jinso gibe sonamgi. Drola penchara sange druparasho. In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. Through the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Kalte rangrik yön ming na namshi drempa chitar gyur. Shen nyongwa dan drelwa, shen nyongwa shen nyongwa dan drelwa le drengyur chibe tukshin no. Kenshen thak dan dembani tongche rang sal na drube mikmen jorwale pumtom mikmen ni gyurmin. So, the day before yesterday, we were looking at the Chittamatra school. We got to the part of the text. We are now in verse number... where are we? We finished verse number 22. We arrive in verse number 23. And what we were seeing is actually the Chittamatra school, so making it very short. First, we saw the Southern Trika school, and then now we are on the Chittamatra school. The Southern Trika school was saying that external reality does actually exist, truly exists. And the Chittamatra school is saying exactly the opposite. It's saying external reality does not exist, but the mind does truly exist. Okay? The Vaibhasika school is saying, the Southern Trika school and Vaibhasika is saying, the mind is more like an illusion. You are not sure about the mind because it's totally relative. External reality is what really exists. It's there, it's solid, Fire burns, water gets wet, if you like it or not. Okay? So, this was the first school view, and we already went through it. Then now we are on the Chittamatra school that goes to the other side and saying, external reality is nothing more, nothing less than a reflection of the mind itself. Everything that you see is nothing more, nothing less than a reflection of the mind itself. So it doesn't really exist. It's not something that it's really there. Okay? It's only a reflection of the mind. And the problem here is that both the Chittamatra and the Southern Trika school, they are not able to distinguish between inherent existence and existence. For them, if something inherently exists, it exists. And if something exists, it inherently exists. So what happens is that they say, the first school, the Southern Trika, they say, external reality inherently exists from their own characteristics as such. And the Chittamatra is saying the mind also truly exists from its own characteristics inherently. Okay? And the Madhyamika is saying external reality does exist, internal reality, the mind, does exist, but both of them do not exist out of its own characteristics and intrinsic way. And here the big difficulty between the schools is because the Chittamatra school do not accept that something can exist and at the same time not exist inherently. There is this conflict coming. So, we saw the day before yesterday, as the Chittamatra school said, but it's not possible for the mind not to exist truly, because when we say something it exists truly, it means it exists from its own characteristics, okay? So it says it's not possible that the mind doesn't exist truly because everything exists only based on the mind and so on. So if the mind would not really exist, then who would be perceiving phenomena? And then the Madhyamika answer, okay, so, and then what happens if the external phenomena do not exist truly and you accept that, then what is the mind actually perceiving? And then the Chittamatra answer, no, the mind is perceiving a reflection of the mind itself. Then it's saying, okay, then it's just like the light illuminating itself. It's not working because the light is already bright. How can it illuminate itself? It's like darkness darkening itself. It's not fitting. So similar to that, it's not like the mind is just perceiving itself. That's not possible. And as it goes on, the Chittamatra school is actually saying, yes, but at the same time also, they have the view that the mind exists truly as at the same time it's being perceived. Anything to exist must be perceived. Okay? So the mind is always being perceived by the mind itself. And then here comes a long discussion. It's a long debate, okay, which we are trying to make it a bit short, which is a debate on which the Chittamatra school says that there is a self-cognition, a mind that perceives the mind itself, and the Madhyamika say, no, this mind doesn't exist. Okay? So there is a long debating about that. So what happened is that the Chittamatra school says the mind exists as at the same time it's constantly being perceived by itself. There is a mind that observes the mind all the time. So it's like I am having a thought, at the same time there is a self-cognition which is observing and perceiving the mind itself. Tibetan is called Kanang Kona La Chokpe Zinam Yangawa. It's the mind that directly perceives only the mind itself, no external phenomena. Okay? So what happens with that is that the Madhyamika says that's not possible. There to be the mind that only perceives the mind itself. First of all, what happens is that this mind would need to exist simultaneously, which means at the same time that I'm having a thought, at the same time I am perceiving that same thought with my mind. And this is not possible, even if we look from our direct experience way. Are we able to observe our mind? I would say yes, no? Can we observe our thoughts and our emotions? Yes. But can we do it simultaneously as the thought arises when we observe it simultaneously? No. It can be right away, right after, but not simultaneously. Okay? So this is the first problem. The other point is that if a mind to exist must be perceived by a mind itself, what happens is that we have the mind that perceives, for example, I have the mind that perceives the bell. Then at the same time I need to have the mind that perceives the mind that perceives the bell. Then what happened? The mind that perceives the mind that perceives the bell, does it exist or not? Yes. So it means that I need a mind that perceives the mind that perceives the mind that perceives the bell. And like this I will go on and on and on. The mind that perceives the mind that perceives the mind that perceives the mind that perceives the bell. I could go on and on and on and on. It becomes infinite. So this is also not working. So the Chittamatra school, they come and they answer, yes, but how can you remember a thought if you have never perceived that thought before? How is that possible? Because in order for you to remember something, you must have experienced it in the past in order for you to remember it. So whenever you remember, I can remember the mind that perceived the bell. I can remember the experience of perceiving the bell. So how can I remember the experience, the mind that perceived the bell, if I have never perceived that mind before? Okay, that's the question that they put, and this is the part of the text in which we are now. So the verse is saying, verse 23, suppose you, the Chittamatra, insisted, but if reflexive awareness doesn't exist, this reflexive awareness is what it's called, this self-cognition mind doesn't exist, then how does a consciousness come to be recalled? How can I recall a consciousness? How can I recall a memory, a thought? Then here the Madhyamika is answering. Well, a recollection comes about from a connection with another object that was experienced, like the poison from a rat. And suppose you Chittamatra persisted, but it can illuminate itself because when endowed by other conditions, there is the seeing of others' mind. Well, a buried treasure vase that's seen from applying actualized magic eye lotion still wouldn't be the eye lotion itself. Okay, let's go first to the first verse, which is quite clear. It says, suppose you insisted, but if reflective awareness doesn't exist, then how does a consciousness come to be recalled? Well, a recollection comes about from a connection with other object that was experienced, like the poison from a rat, which is, before we understand the example of the poison of the rat, okay? The point is that when we remember one thought, one emotion, how do we connect to that emotion? How do we connect to that consciousness, that thought? By remembering the thought or by remembering the object that was perceived? How do we do? The object. When, for example, if I remember the mind that perceived the bell, how do I connect to that mind? By thinking about the mind or by thinking about the bell? By thinking about the bell. So, that's why here the Madhyamika answer. Well, a recollection, a memory, recollection of what? Of a consciousness, comes about from a connection with the object, with another object that was experienced. So what happened is that I connect my mind to the object that was perceived, and so I can connect my mind with the perception that was there. It's like remembering the perception through the object that I perceived. Also, another thing is the following. When we recollect a memory, do we recollect it in the same way as we had in the moment, or it changes in time? It changes. Why? Because we changed. And when we think about the same object, we see it in a different way. Okay? Luckily, it's like that. Okay? So what happened is that if I had any situation that I experienced in the past, and I remember it, it will bring about a similar emotion because I am more or less the same. I haven't changed that much. And I feel like remembering the moment that I saw. I can remember when I saw you. So this will bring me a similar emotion to the emotion when I have seen you before. But if I have changed the way how I relate to you, when I have changed myself, when I remember when I saw you, it changes my mind. Okay? It's like, that's why we say that the past is impermanent. For example, if I am walking on a road, okay, and then suddenly comes someone and hit me very strong, push me down to the ground, I fall down, I break my arm, okay, I go to the hospital with my arm badly broken, and what have happened to me? The person that pushed me down to the ground and broke my arm, was that an object of attraction, aversion, or indifference? An object of aversion. Someone really harmed me so bad, I hate you. No? Basically, okay? So what happened is that while I am there comes the police or someone and shows me a movie that was shot from a security camera somewhere in the road, showing what happened. And what happened is that the police comes and shows me the video and explains me what happened, that behind me there was a robbery. And a guy was shooting in my direction. So the person nearby me saw this happening, and he pushed me in order for me not to be killed. Otherwise, the bullet would have went exactly in the direction where I was. So, now that I see that the person actually saved my life, and I recollect what happened, is it still an object of aversion? Or is it an object of gratitude? Okay? So what happened is that in this way, what have happened, my arms is still hurting, but because I recollect and I see the same situation in a different way, it changes. Okay? So this is one of the ways how we see that the past is actually impermanent. Because what remains of the past now is the memory of the past. And when I relate myself differently to the object that I had perceived, it changes the way how I experience it. Okay? But still, I can remember when I was angry. I can remember the anger that I had. Okay? So even though now I see it as an object of gratitude, can I remember the anger or not? How do I remember the anger? By remembering the way how I was feeling, by remembering the sensation, by remembering the feeling of the body, by remembering the object of anger that I was seeing at that moment. Okay? But the main point here is saying that when we remember something, an emotion, a consciousness, basically we remember the object of perception of that consciousness. And this brings us to the memory similar to the consciousness itself. Okay? So it's not that we have the memory of the consciousness, we have the memory of what have happened. This is similar like the poison from a rat. What happened is like this. It is the example that is being given is that in winter time, and I don't know really much about this, this is what is written in the text, in the commentary. In winter time, we have, if we are bitten by a rat in winter time, what happens is that the poison from the rat does not manifest. Okay? Then, when spring comes about, the infection and all that, it will come about. So it's like if the poison manifests. You know, rat doesn't have, it's not a specific a poison, but it may be an infection or whatsoever that comes from the bite of a rat. So here it's said a poison, but it says, in the moment that the rat bites us in winter, the poison does not manifest. Then, later, when it becomes spring, when it says, when the sound of the dragons manifest, which is basically when the thunders start to come, that's when spring arises. Okay? What happens is that at that point, the poison will manifest. Okay? So what happens is that when the poison manifests, actually, we remember, oh, this is because the rat has bitten me. In the moment that the a rat actually bite us, we had no connection about the poison. We didn't know there was any poison. Okay? But because I am feeling this now and I can remember what have happened before the object, I do connect the two things. I am not remembering this sensation of the rat biting me, because that sensation, that consciousness had no awareness whatsoever about the poison. I remember I'm making the connection between the bite that I received because of the object that have happened and the situation that I'm experiencing right now. So, as it says here. Pernagungi tusu chibe lulam mukbana shiduk shuk yokyang mukba nyongi tuk manyong. So when the rat bites us in the winter, we experience the bite, but we do not experience the poison. Tele tu chi drukge dra tebana mukbe tse duk shukpar duk nyamtu drenkyang ngargitse tuk manyong shinos. Mukbe tse duk shukpar duk nyamtu drenkyang ngargitse tuk manyong shinos. Tela chibe mukbani ngunzingi yul nyong shinos. So later, when the sounds of the dragon manifests, when you listen to the sounds of the dragon, which means when spring arises, okay? Mukbetse tuk shuk par tuk nyam tu drenkyang, ngargitse tuk manyunga shinos. At the time of spring, we remember that we have the poison from which we were bitten, because it's the moment where it manifests. But we do not experience the poison from before, because we were not aware of the poison when we actually received the bite. Okay, similar to that, tela chibe mukbani ngunzinki yul nyonga shinos. The rat biting us is like the mind perceiving the object at the actual moment. Mukpa dang tu chiktu shukbani yul sunwadan tu chiktu yobe yul chingi nyongadan draos. Mukpa dan tu chiktu shukbani yul sunwadan tu chiktu yobe yulchingi nyongadan trawos. The fact of receiving the bite and at the same time getting the poison, okay? Yul sungadan tuchik tu yobe yulching nyongadan trawo is similar as the experience of perceiving the actual object. At the yul sungadan is like grabbing at the object and experiencing it at the same time, which means when I see the bell, I get the experience of seeing the bell at the same time. Teitse yulchen rangi rang manyongani mukpetse tuk manyongadan travels. At the moment of perception, the fact that the mind does not perceive the mind, it's similar to the at the moment of bite not perceiving that we have the poison. Okay. Chi mukpa drempa ni yul nyonga drempa dan travels. Chi mukpa drempa ni yul nyonga dan chi mukpa drempa ni yul nyonga drempa dan travels. Later, when we remember the bite, this is similar as when we remember the object. Yul nyong drempa ni nigi ngargi yulchen korangi korama nyongyans drempa ni mukpa drempa nigi tu ngar shukpe tuk manyonga drempa dan travels. Yul nyong drempa ni yulnyon drempa nigi ngargi yulchen korangi ngargi yulchen korangi korang manyongyas drempa ni mukpa drempa nigi tu ngar shukpe tuk manyomba drempa dan travels. So what happened is that, similar to that, later, even though in the moment of the experience we do not have the mind that perceives the experience itself, later by remembering the object we do remember the experience. Similar to that is the fact that even though later we experience the poison, we can remember that we had the bite and we had not experienced the poison before. Now I know that I have the poison, but I can know that, before, when the rat bite me, I didn't know there was a poison. I could not experience the poison. So the point here basically is to make us, the example is not so easy to understand this example, but the basic concept is understanding that when we see something, we have a direct experience with it and it remains there. Later, we remember the object and by that we remember the experience. Even though I understand now that there were aspects of the experience that I couldn't understand at the moment. Okay? But it's by remembering the object that I can actually remember the experience that I had. Basically, this is the essence, okay? Though just the point of the question was, when we say that we can change the past, that the past is impermanent, this does not actually mean that, yesterday something happened and I cut my arm, okay? I have a cut in my arm. And now I say, oh no, I never cut my arm. That's not what I mean. I can see and experience the same thing in many different ways. That's why the past is impermanent. And not because in the same way that I can look at the present and I can judge and I can see this object in many different ways. I can attribute different values to the mala and I can see it in many different ways. Similar to that, I can attribute many different values and meanings to the past and experiences that I have had. But if I say that a mala is a dog, it's a wrong perception. In the same way that if I say that what I have happened is not, I was not cut, but something else happened, it's also a wrong perception. So it's not that we can change the past because we say the things that happened didn't happen and so on. We can see them in many different ways. Sure, the only thing that exists for us in the past is nothing more, nothing less than the memory that we have and what people tell us. So really, our perception of the past, of 100, 200, 300 years ago, whatever, it's totally fake from my own point of view. Because what do we know? What someone told us? If I am not able to trust what someone is telling me that he experienced 10 minutes ago, really? No. I believe in the stories because I have trust in the person that tells me, and I have trust in the meaning that they are bringing to me. I don't really make so much importance if it happened literally exactly in the way that it's told. It's the meaning that is given to me, the benefit that I receive from it. Okay? So the point is that when we look in relation to the past, what do we have of the past? Information, people that said things to us, images, memories. And I'm sure that at that moment of the history, each one saw it in a different way, and we will have different versions of what have happened, and the versions change in time, and so on. Okay? So, the point is that the past changes because we change our own perspective. But this doesn't mean that what have happened didn't happen, or so on, or something that didn't happen happened, and vice versa. Okay? This is not what we mean by that. Anyhow, we go back here now to text, and the main point is that when we remember something, we are not remembering the emotion or the perception, we are remembering the object, and through the object is like a hook that is bringing us to the emotion and the perception that we had. Okay? When we remember a perception, we are not remembering the perception itself directly. We are remembering the object that is like a hook that makes us to remember a perception. Like if I had anger, and I remember my anger, actually what I remember is the object of anger and makes me to have a similar emotion now. Yeah. The object of perception of the positive experience that you had. For example, I remember, Tutla, when the experience that I had going up and being in the Lama Lazzo, okay? Or I remember the difficulty of going up the stairs, going up to the Lama Lazzo, okay? Can you remember the sensation? No? So, at that moment, when you remember the sensation, how does that memory come? From the sensation to the difficulty of breathing and everything else, or it goes the other way around? But in the same way, the hook is like this. When you remember the difficulty of breathing, or when you remember the wonderful sensation of being there, you remember the image of the lake, you remember the objects that were there, and this brings you back to that type of emotion because of what represents that object to you. What you can do with it, now this is something else. The point here now is how do we actually recollect it, how this appears to the mind. By remembering positive emotions, it's very good because it brings us joy and we can rejoice about it and we can create the causes to repeat them again. There are many different reasons. And we familiarize our mind with the positive emotion. This is so wonderful, no? How you can create it again, going back to Lama Lazzo, one possibility. Okay? No, but what I mean is like, when we remember the object, it brings us to feel that emotion similar again, positive, and this makes us to familiarize ourselves with that emotion also, with that type of feeling, which is positive also in the same way. But basically, to have an experience again, we need to create the causes and conditions again. Okay? Oh well, then let's go on then, little bit more. So the point here, it was basically the fact that, first of all, our mind is very complex. It's not something that we can understand in a linear, simple way. So what happened basically is that the question is, but what happens when we have an emotion and we don't know the actual cause of that emotion. How does that actually fit in? And here what happens is like this. First of all, when we have an emotion and we don't know what's the cause of that emotion, for example, I have fear, or I have sadness, or I have joy, whatever, and I don't know what is the actual cause. This is not the fact of remembering the past, it's experiencing the present. Okay? It is an emotion that is in the present. Secondly, most of the times, even when we do have emotions and we don't know exactly where they come from, we mostly project at something. We always say the cause is this or the cause is that most of the times. So, for example, some time ago, I had a moment in which I was quite sad. And it was just my own process. And I went to Rinpoche one day and Rinpoche said, Rinpoche, I am sad, And Rinpoche said, what happened, Oh, tell me what's the problem. We solve it right away. We do something, And because I never complained to Rinpoche about almost anything. So one time I go there and I said, oh, I am sad or something. Then he was like really worried. Okay, what should we do? Then I went to Rinpoche and I said, Rinpoche, to be sincere, there are many things, if I try to I start pointing my finger, there are many things that I would say, I want this to be different, that to be different, that to be different, and so on. But if I really look deeply, I cannot see a connection directly with this sensation of sadness and the object itself. I'm quite sure that if I change that object, I will find another one and the sadness will continue. So while talking to Rinpoche, this clarity came to my mind. And I said, I just need to wait. It's like for the dirt to come down. I just need to wait, give the right time. Or for the sadness to give a name to it, to understand where it's coming from, or for it to let it go. And luckily what happened is that I just gave the right time, just observing it without giving it space to it, just letting it be there, observing, and after some time it went away, and luckily it didn't come back. Okay? So, what happens is that even though that was an emotion that I had, that at the same time I couldn't find a name for it, I couldn't find the actual cause for it, for me to remember that emotion, how can I do that? By remembering the situations in which I felt that emotion. Even though I know that they were not the real cause. But in order for me to go back to it, how do I do? Remembering the actual situations in which I felt that emotion. Okay? So we go back through a sensation, through a perception, through an emotion. The hook to it is the object through which we perceived, we had that emotion and that perception. Okay? Okay, then we go on now. Kenshen dakda dembani. Kenshen dakda dembani tongche rang salna drube migmen jorwale pumdong migmen ni gyurmin. Okay. So, the next verse is quite simple actually, which is giving the example of the Chittamatra still trying to find a way out. And it says, and suppose you persisted, Chittamatra, by saying, but it can illuminate itself because when endowed with other conditions, there is the seeing of others' minds. Then the Madhyamika answer, well, a buried treasure vase that's seen from applying actualized magic eye lotion still won't be the eye lotion itself. Still wouldn't be the eye lotion itself, which is saying, even though, because the point is here, the Chittamatra is saying, yes, but the mind can be perceived by someone else's mind who have clairvoyance. So by the development of concentration, I can perceive the mind of someone else, even being far away. So if it's possible to perceive the mind of someone else from far, why cannot I perceive my mind that is so much more near? Okay? And the answer that is given is saying, okay, even though if you put the eye lotion, this magic eye lotion, that to help you to see the treasures under the earth, which means that it's said to be these eye lotions through which it's possible to find gold and precious stones and these things under the earth. So there was like in the Tengyur, We have these books here, actually. There are all these types of magic lotions and potion and things in order to do all the most strange things, like the other day Lama Michel was talking, what was his name? Lalita Vajra, the Mahasiddha. He had this quick step realization, to walk quickly. And there were many others. So this is something like, there are all the description how to do all this stuff, okay? There's a lot of things, how to walk quickly, how to able to generate body heat, and how to able to stay without eating, to develop clairvoyance, and to go underwater. There are all these different strange type of things, which are all actually called mundane realizations. Actually, Lama Tsongkhapa said very clearly, there is nothing so special in developing such mundane realizations, because when we die, we lose them. Instead, the real realization is that we need to put effort is to develop love and compassion and patience and wisdom and renunciation and bodhicitta, because this we take from life to life. It's like one time came this man to Lama Ganchen in the United States, and he was even a little bit fat, just for you to get the image, the picture. And he went to Lama Ganchen and said, I heard that there are some practitioners and some practices to learn how to levitate and to fly. And Lama Ganchen said, yes. He said, yes, I would like to learn it. Lama Ganchen said, not so useful. Because with a lot of effort, maybe you are able to fly some 15 meters, something like this. Nowadays we have elevators and planes. So there is airplane, there is elevator. You don't need to put so much effort for that. The point is that it's much better to put the same effort to develop love and compassion and wisdom and qualities that we take from life to life. Okay? So anyhow, the example here that is given is that even though we put an eye lotion with magical powers that helps us to see the treasures that are under the earth, far away, this doesn't mean that we see the eye lotion itself. Okay? The eye lotion is very near and we don't see it, but we still see the treasures far, far away. So it's not because something is near that we need to see it. It's like the light cannot illuminate itself, but it can illuminate what is very far away from it. So the mind is the same example that was given in the beginning. The mind is like a knife. It doesn't matter how sharp it may be, it's not able to cut itself. It's like a beam of light. It cannot illuminate itself because it's already illuminated by its own nature in this sense. Okay. Then we go on because this verse is very simple. Rangrik mena shenrik miteba gakpa nga jitar tongto sheba dak dirni gakpar chaminte dirni dunga gyurgyurpa dempar tokpa dokcha yin. Jitar tongto sheba da dirni gakpar chaminte dirni dunga gyurgyurpa dempar tokpa dokcha yin. So, the next verse is also quite simple, and it says, verse number 25. The Chittamatra say, how something is seen, heard, or known, if not being nullified in this at all. Here, instead, conceptual cognition of it as truly existent, which has become the cause of suffering, is being turned back. Which means, the main point here it says, how something is seen, heard, or known is not being nullified in this at all. In this means what? In this lack of inherent existence, how are we not eliminating the possibility of everything else? Because the Chittamatra school is saying, if you tell me that the mind does not truly exist, then how is there possibility of seeing anything, of listening to anything, of touching anything, if nothing truly exists? So here it's saying, how something is being seen, heard, or known is not being nullified in this at all. How something that is being seen, heard, or known is not being nullified, is not being eliminated by this lack of inherent existence at all. Okay? What the Chittamatra school is saying is that in the context that nothing truly exists, Also, there shouldn't be eyesight, there shouldn't be seeing, there shouldn't be listening, there shouldn't be touching, and so on. So, here instead, conceptual cognition of it what? Of the eye object, of the sound, and so on, as truly existent, which has become the cause of for suffering, is being turned back. What is being turned back, what is being said that it doesn't exist, is not what I see, it's not what I listen, it's not the touch, and so on. What is being turned back is the inherent existence of such objects. Which means there is nothing against seeing, listening, touching, thinking, and so on. What I am actually going against, the Madhyamika school clarifies here, is that I am going against an truly existent, an inherently existent sound, an inherently existent touch, an inherently existent taste, an inherently existent thought, and so on. So the point is not that phenomena do not exist. They do not exist inherently. So when I say that something does not truly exist, it means it doesn't exist as it appears to us as being of inherent existence. Okay? Is this clear? So as it says, how something is seen, heard, or known is not being nullified in this at all. In this, what we mean? In this lack of inherent existence. How inside this lack of inherent existence, lack of truly existence, if nothing truly exists, how you are not nullifying what you see and touch and taste and so on. Here, instead, conceptual cognition of it, of what? Of sound, taste, touch, and so on, as being truly existent, as being inherently existence, which has become the cause of all suffering, is being turned back. That's what is being eliminated. That's what we are saying that don't exist. The truly existence, the inherent existence of all phenomena, and not the phenomena itself. We are not saying that the mind don't exist. We are not saying that the object of perception does not exist. What we are saying is that both the mind and the objects do not exist inherently, do not truly exist from its own characteristics. Okay? It's clear, this distinction. Okay. Semle gyuma shemin shin, shemin paryam mitaknas. Rangri mena shenrik miteba gakpala ni. Mweda sem gyuma tenye shintos. Okay. Only one more verse, 1 second, and we finish this part. Actually, 2 lines. Semle gyuma shen ming shin, shen ming paryang mitakna. Semle gyuma tenye dang, shen tu jotu meba gakpa. Suppose you said an illusion of an external object isn't different from the mind, yet it can be conceived as known different. Well, if there were a truly existent functional phenomenon, how could it not be different? And if you said it is not different, it couldn't be a truly existent functional phenomenon. Okay, I think we'll go this the next day. The day after tomorrow, we continue on this part. Okay? But the basic here is saying, if you say that it's the same thing as the mind, but at the same time the mind truly exists, it is not, there is contradiction between of it. Or it's only the same thing, or is a different object of perception, if it truly exists. But anyhow, we go through this the next time. Okay? And the conclusion of today here is basically understanding that external phenomena do exist, but this doesn't mean that they inherently do exist. This is one of the main conclusions that we need to go through. And what is very important for all of us to observe is how do phenomena appear to us as being truly existent, first thing. Second thing, let's try to observe our own mind. How do we remember our memories? How do we remember our thoughts, our emotions? And try to understand, to put together the teachings and our own direct experience. Okay? This helps us to remember, to make it more clear also. So, it is a very good question, very complex question at the same time, talking about the memories and how do we actually remember situations. And basically, the point is that when we remember something, we do have that emotion. We can go back to it. But just going to the point of what actually I think is the maybe important for us to understand is that normally we try very often to see it in with duality. Internal reality, external reality. Mind and object that is perceived. Okay? The more we create such duality, the more it will be difficult to understand how all of this functions. So basically what happens is that when I see the bell or when I see the crystal column, okay, the crystal column only exists to me because there is the perception of it in this present moment. Okay? At the same time, I'm not saying that it only exists to me in my own perception of reality because I am perceiving it. And the perception only exists because the column exists. So it's like, when I see the bell exists to me because I perceive it. The perception of the bell exists because the bell exists. They are dependent. It's like here and there, big and small. One exists independent of the other. So actually internal reality and external reality are much more near and connected to each other than we can actually normally imagine. At the same time, it's said that the mind cannot exist without having an object of perception. The mind always has something that it is perceiving. But what is important to understand is that the mind depends on the object of perception. The object of perception to exist to the mind depends on the mind. So they both go all together. What Shantideva is saying here is that when we remember a mind, we do that by the hook is the object of perception, without which the mind could not exist. So, a key to understand this is to understand that we are totally incapable of having a thought, an emotion, a perception, without having an object of perception. So whenever we remember a thought, we are actually remembered at the same time the object of perception of that thought also. But the hook is the object of perception that we are remembering. And by remembering the object of perception, naturally I will go back to the perception itself. Because they are inseparable somehow. Okay. Tutla, you had something? And the memories, how we recollect the emotions and how we recollect our memories. Try to observe, try to apply the teachings into our own direct experience. Ok? So I think we leave here for today. Io direi che possiamo lasciare qui per oggi, poi piano piano andiamo avanti con questo capitolo che è un po' lunghino, però piano piano lo facciamo. Ok? We stop here for today, then slowly we will continue with this 9th chapter, and it is, vast and profound. So to go deep into each part, it takes time. We have no hurry. Okay. Chetsun lame kutse rapten chi namkar trinle chochur gepadang losan tempe dreme sasumgi drove munsel tato ne gyurchi nimo dele tsendele nime kuyan delek shing Ninsen takto delek pe koncho sumgi jingi lo koncho sumgi ngodrup sol koncho sumgi trashish Tamba lame sangye rinpoche, kyoba lame tamcho rinpoche, drimba lame gendu rinpoche Kyamne kuncho sumla che babul. Oma hung. Locho sambo pagyo drashi patuche tembe tinle yarngo da pegye drolo zambeze. Panden la me she la che babul.